This is the story of Albert Spann, the king of the BDs, out west. It is also a cautionary tale about confidential witness number 11 joining a street gang, then flipping to join a rival gang, and then flipping again before turning snitch. In the steaming hot summer of 1991, Albert Spann was a black disciples minister on the west side of Chicago when Mickey Bull, the only BD to ever hold the position of bishop, was murdered by the gangster disciples, igniting a war that would last for years. Jerome King Shorty Freeman was in jail, and Mickey Bull, the man who almost single-handedly expanded the Black Disciples gang into a drug-dealing empire by flipping a lot of buildings in the infamous Robert Taylor Homes projects to BD, was now dead. The Supreme High Minister, Marvell Marvelous Thompson, orchestrated the takeover of the Calumet building on the south side when he convinced a gangster disciple named Daniel Scandalous Jahan and his whole crew to flip to BD in 1991. The Calumet building became the BD's home base of operation, but the gang was also very active on the west side, where Albert Spann ran the BD's drug operation and terrorized confidential witness number 11 in the 2004 RICO indictment that saw 47 members of the Black Disciples drug dealing operation arrested. Gangs had always been active in the Henry Horner Homes, which was called the Hornets by residents on the west side because of the poor living conditions, even by public housing standards. But street gangs never took power or created much significant action until the late 1970s, and this is when the scattered members of the Black Gangster Disciples on the west side found a home in the Hornets and started warring with rival gangs for control of the drug trade. In 1992, Albert Spann, the most powerful BD minister on the west side, went to jail, and his nephew, Randy Carter, controlled the BD Southwest until around the year 2000 when his uncle returned home. Before Albert Spann went to jail, Marvell Thompson was crowned King Vale on the streets and had created a board of directors to help him rule the BDs. Albert Spann and Randy Carter were the board members representing the gang from out west, and this is how they made life for confidential witness number 11 a living hell.
Confidential witness number 11 joined the Gangster Disciples in 1983. For context, let me set the scene for what life was like living in a project building, controlled by the Chicago Housing Authority, and Chicago street gangs during the mid-80s. On June 10, 1985, 17-year-old gang member Johnny Freeman sexually assaulted 5-year-old Shavannah McCann at the Henry Horner Homes housing projects, in a vacant 13th floor apartment at 2111 West Lake Street. Freeman lured her to the vacant apartment with candy, then when he was finished with his sick, disgusting act, he threw her from the window. However, she struggled and clung to the ledge screaming out "Mama! Mama!" But Freeman shoved her from the ledge and she plunged to her death. Senseless violence still plagues the city of Chicago, but believe it or not, things were a lot worse back then. After leaving prison in about 1990, CW11 began selling powder cocaine for Albert Spann, who was a BD minister at that time, at a spot near Monroe and Levitt Streets. There were about 10 to 15 BD members working the drug spot for Spann. CW11 was allowed to work the spot even though CW11 was not a BD member at the time because CW11 knew how to make money, and was close to Spann. According to the indictment, in the early 1990s, Spann was a BD minister for the West Side. There were also other ranking BD members on the West Side. CW11 ran a crack-selling spot for another BD member at 2111 West Lake Street building of the Henry Horner Homes, after Spann went to prison. And yes, that's the same building where a monster threw a 5-year-old girl out of a window, 13 stories down to her death. CW11 was in charge of 5 to 7 BD members, and those BD members resented CW11 because CW11 was a GD member. CW11 was able to maintain this position because of CW11's relationship with another ranking BD member, and CW11's ability to make money. The spot ran for about 6 months, and sold about $5,000 worth of crack each day. While working at this spot, the BD put out Nation Work, which was drugs supplied by the BD leaders that had to be sold at the BD spots. All of the proceeds from the Nation Work sales went to the BD leaders. Thompson was the highest ranking BD, then, and now. Another ranking BD member told CW11 that Thompson had put out Nation work to be sold. CW11 argued with another ranking BD member over Nation work money. CW11 then began selling crack on CW11's own at 2215 West Lake Street. This was in BD territory. Shortly thereafter, 6 to 7 BD members got in a gun battle with CW11 and one of CW11's workers, and one BD member was shot. CW11 and a ranking BD member eventually reconciled, and CW11 continued selling at the 2215 building. Eventually, because CW11's spot was making so much money from crack sales, the BD only allowed the spot to be open for half the day, which CW11 did not abide by. This resulted in another shooting, but nobody was hit. A ranking BD member in CW11 again made peace, and CW11 was allowed to return to selling crack at 2215. The 2215 spot was selling 1/2 to 1 kilogram of crack each week. The BD again moved to shut CW11 down, because the spot was in BD territory. CW11 refused to close down. In about 1992, the BD got into a war with traveling Vice Lord Street Gang members. CW11 offered to help the BD in their war, but was shot 21 times by 2 BD members. CW11 recovered, and resumed selling crack out of 2215, and warring with the BD from about late 1992 through early 1995. And, if you're wondering why a GD kept selling drugs in BD territory, after he was shot 21 times, instead of moving his drug business into GD territory, you're not alone. I was thinking the same thing.
In 1994, Marvell Thompson went to visit Larry Hoover in prison where they called a truce, the first since Mickey Bull was murdered in 1991, in a never-ending gang war. According to the RICO indictment against the BDs a decade after the truce in 2004, in about January 1995, CW11 left the GD and joined the TVL to spite the BDs. And if you were thinking, wait, isn't that the gang that CW11 offered to help the BDs war with, before 2 BDs shot his dumb ass 21 times, then you're a lot smarter than CW11. The BD and the TVL were rivals. After that, there was a meeting at Bennigan's restaurant in downtown Chicago between the leaders of the TVL, the GD, the BD, and CW11 about CW11. Thompson and other members attended for the BD. Thompson did not want a TVL having control of a building in BD territory, which the 2215 building was. Thompson stated that 2215 was a BD building, and that it would stay a BD building. The Bennigan's meeting concluded with an agreement that CW11 would keep the 2215 building, but Thompson was extremely upset with this outcome. Later that same night, CW11 was shot in the ankle by 2 BD members. CW11 remained a TVL from 1995 through 1999 and sold crack from the 2215 building. The BD controlled all of the surrounding buildings in the Henry Horner homes, and the ranking board member at that time was Carter. CW11 eventually broke from the TVL. BD members again pressured CW11 to join the BD, and in 1999, CW11 agreed. And if you were thinking, wait, it's crazy for CW11 to join the BDs after they shot him 21 times in 1992, and then shot him in the ankle in 1995, then you're a lot smarter than CW11.
If you think this story is crazy, and would like to join the Cartoon News Network's army for more insanity from the streets of Chicago, please put some pressure on that like button and subscribe. CW11 was blessed into the Black Disciple Street Gang by Randy Carter and another BD member at Victor Herbert Park located at 2100 West Monroe, which serves as a BD meeting location. About 3 members of CW11's crew also joined the BD, but some remained TVL. Ultimately, CW11 was made a co-minister in charge of the West Haven Apartments, or new homes, located at Maple and Levitt Streets. The BD ministers on the west side were McCrae and Garrett. During this time period, CW11 met directly with McCrae and Thompson at one of Thompson's buildings on 67th and Parnell. There, Thompson told CW11 that he was happy CW11 had joined the BD. CW11 had 6 to 8 gang members working for CW11 as the co-minister in charge of the new homes. McCrae and Reed supplied CW11 with 2¼ to 4½ ounces of crack daily, and eventually 9 to 13 ounces a week. In about June 2001, McCrae instructed CW11 to sell a ¼ kilogram of crack for Spann, who was the board member for the West Side. CW11 did so, and turned all of the proceeds from this sale over to McCrae, who, in turn, gave them to Spann. In 2001, CW11 was selling about $4,000 to $5,000 of crack a day at the spot, but began to have trouble with other BD members because some members of CW11's crew were still TVL members, and the BD members only wanted other BD members to make money in BD territory. The spot was open 7 days a week, with the workers selling 25 packs of dime bags for $250. A BD member began supplying BD members with crack to sell at CW11's drug spot. CW11 first went to Carter to resolve the problem, and subsequently to Spann. The conversation with Spann occurred at Victor Herbert Park, in about June 2001. Spann, McCrae, other BD members, along with 2 members of CW11's crew were present. Spann and CW11 argued about TVL members selling in BD territory. The BD members continued to sell from CW11's spot, and CW11 threatened them. Those BD members left and returned with Bird, which is Randy Carter's nickname, and other BD members. Bird asked CW11 to get into his car to go talk to Spann, and CW11 refused. Shortly thereafter, numerous BD members returned, and had a shootout with CW11 and CW11's crew. CW11 heard that Spann had put a hit on CW11. During early August 2001, CW11 reached out to Spann through McCrae, and McCrae said that Spann called the hit off, but that a number of BD members were angry with CW11. On August 8, 2001, CW11 was riding in a car on the west side with CW11's wife and 2 young children, aged 6 and 9. Carter pulled up alongside with Garrett in the passenger seat, and another BD member in the back of the car. Garrett got out of the car and began shooting at CW11. Both CW11 and CW11's 6-year-old child were shot. Because of this shooting, CW11 decided to cooperate with law enforcement. CW11 identified Carter and Garrett as being involved in the shooting. CW11 testified in a state court preliminary hearing regarding the shooting against Carter and Garrett. During this time, Carter offered CW11 $3,500 and a trip to Disney World if CW11 stopped cooperating. CW11 rejected this offer. CW11 also received a message through CW11's brother, a BD member, from Spann. Spann said he was sorry that CW11's child was shot, but CW11 should have known better, and that if CW11 testified, CW11 better wear a bulletproof vest for the rest of his life.
Wow. $3,500 and a trip to Disney World. Really? Albert Spann wanted to kill CW11 for snitching, but he wasn't the only rat, and what's even crazier is the fact that King Vale, Donnell Scandalous Jahan, the BD twins, and confidential witness 12 all snitched when they were arrested. On July 9, 2002, CW12 notified agents that a BD member told CW12 that CW12 had to work security for a meeting that was going to take place at Victor Herbert Park between Spann and Southside BD members. Agents conducted surveillance in that area and saw Thompson, Jahan, and Spann meet and talk in the park. Also in the park at that time were McCrae and other BD members. After meeting for approximately 1 hour, Thompson, Spann, and Jahan began to walk away, followed by a group of BD members. Thompson and Jahan then left the area in Jahan's Cadillac Escalade SUV. And this marked the beginning of the short-lived era of Three Kings, where King Vale ruled over the BDs in Englewood and on the low end, while Donnell Scandalous Jahan was king of the BDs on the southeast side, and Albert Spann was king out west, until the feds brought RICO charges in 2004. Thanks for watching the final installment of our series on the story of three BD kings. In our next video, we'll reveal the most dangerous place to eat in Chicago, and it's not where many people may think, before we begin our series on the most dangerous places to live in Chicago. And in an upcoming video, we'll take Black Gangster Disciples' history back to the beginning, with shocking revelations about the relationship between King David Barksdale and King Larry Hoover.